Good evening. I'll call to order the regular meeting of Monday, July 10th, 2023 at 6 p.m. I will now ask if there's anybody disclosure of any pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we will now move directly into delegations and presentations. I'll ask Sergeant Robert Griffin and Janet Feaver and Detachment Commander Anthony Hymers to come forward and present a O.P.P billing model. Please and thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, everyone, Council, Inspector Hymers, for having us here today. I'm Sergeant Rob Griffin. I'm from the Municipal Policing Bureau at our General Headquarters in Aurelia. I'm also here with my colleague, Janet Feaver. I myself am a police officer. I have been for quite some time with the gray you can see here. I've had an opportunity to do lots of things across the province, as well as work at a few different police services, municipal and provincial, which kind of fits my role here at the Municipal Policing Bureau. I'll just introduce Janet, let her say hello here.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Janet Feaver. I'm a civilian with the Municipal Policing Bureau, which means I'm not an officer. I've spent a lot of years with the O.P.P. in the Fleet Supply and Weapons Services Bureau, Human Resources, Corporate Communications Policy. So between Rob and I, we should be able to address most of your questions this evening.
Perfect. So we don't bore anyone. We're going to go back and forth. So I'll talk a little bit, and then Janet will talk a little bit, and we'll try to get through this. Just to give you a little heads up, we're not here to make anyone a billing model expert, so don't worry about that. There's no test or anything with this. This is just an overview. The most important slide will be the last slide, and on that slide's our contact information. So when you thumb through this on your own time and you see that information, my cell phone number's on there, also our office number. So if there's any question and the inspector is not available, feel free to call us. That number is a business number, so just let us know who you are and we'll try to answer your question that way as well. So let's move into the presentation. First of all, what we're going to go over today, we're just going to talk briefly about the O.P.P service delivery model. And the reason for that is it really ties into the billing model and why we have the billing model the way it is. Second of all, we are going to talk about the billing model itself. And then this is going to be a made in Ingersoll presentation. So we've got your bill here specifically to talk about and go through directly. So if we're going to go over the billing model, we're going to just go over your bill just to give a full understanding of that. And then questions and answers. So any questions that anyone has, we can do that along the way. Feel free to just put your hand up. We can try to answer things along the way, or if you feel more comfortable waiting till the end. At the end of the presentation, we'll have questions up on the board, and you can just ask questions freely. I have a little technical difficulty here. I'm advancing the slides, but they're not going, so just 1 second here.
Is someone else controlling the slide presentation?
Yeah, it's on the screen. When I hit next, it doesn't go on the screen. Just
Okay, so there you go.
let's see.
Oh, okay.
Inspector Hymers put on.
There you go. If it's not synced, if it's easier on your end, I could just say next slide. That might work too. As I came in this morning, I'm not sure everyone got one, but I dropped off the O.P.P Municipal Policing Reference Guide. That's a quick reference for what we're presenting tonight. So it's good to just have, if you, maybe the questions that may come up in your mind, you could be answered right in that book on its own. There's a lot of great content. It was put together through conglomeration of a lot of different units at the O.P.P and different bureaus to make sure we got a quick, easy guide for reference just on quick questions. So
We do all have the slide deck on our agenda, but it would be nice for it to be on camera, so, yeah, so we'll give it a couple more minutes so that we can show it to the audience watching at home. So
Absolutely.
all 7 of them, so.
Mike, can I just get you to just hit those other lights up there? Thank you. Just in the meantime, I will thank you for coming. This presentation was given to the Police Services Board, and the board thought it would be very valuable information for the rest of council and the community. So again, I appreciate you coming back to Ingersoll and presenting it again to a bigger audience.
Absolutely.
We'll try to keep it going.
Perfect.
How's the drive in from Aurelia?
It was good. It was very quick. No slowdowns at all. Yeah. I know, it's strange.
Just put the lights on and zoom.
I thought you had to organize for us.
We do our best. We do our best to accommodate.
Just while we're waiting, perhaps we will do some other business real quick, and then we'll come back once we get the technical difficulties solved. Councillor Bowman, you have a motion for the consent agenda?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Just bear with me for a minute while we change course here. There we go, right there. Moved by myself, Councillor Bowman, seconded by Councillor Youth, that the items in the July 2023 consent agenda be adopted as presented.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And Councillor Hughes, you have the minutes for the June 12th regular meeting?
Yes, I do. Moved by myself, Councillor Yu, seconded by Councillor Helleroo, that the minutes from the June 12th, 2023 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And I think we'll stop there as we have more presentations after that, so a little bit of efficiency there. I certainly hope everybody had a good Canada Day weekend, and unfortunately I was out of town, but I heard there was a lot of big booms and colorful explosions in town, and lots of people were there, so excellent and well done. Would council be interested in moving down to the correspondence and resolutions? Anybody object to that? No. Okay, well, we can always skip that. The first one on the correspondence, the Ingersoll Rural Cemetery Board correspondence. Does anybody have questions of that item? Seeing none, I believe Councillor Hudson has a resolution prepared for that.
Yes, thank you. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive the correspondence from the Ingersoll Rural Cemetery Board as information, and that Council advise staff to enter into discussions with the Township of Zora to form recommendations for the future of the governance of the Ingersoll Rural Cemetery.
Discussion. Councillor Hughes.
I'll speak to the letter that was sent in, seeing as I'm council appointee to the cemetery board. Basically, what we're looking at is how we're going to move forward. The board of directors there, finding it harder to find replacements for staff, notably the the caretaker and the treasurer. So there's a lot of knowledge in those two, and unfortunately, they are getting older and would like to retire. So we need to look at moving forward with something that, like with that, as well as there's going to be some capital investments that are going to be needed in the next few years that going to make it more difficult for the board to continue in regards to basically it's just going to cost whomever more money. We're just looking to, as well as we're finding it difficult to get board members as well. So we're just looking for direction from the two municipal councils who are involved, Zora Township as well as the town of Ingersoll, as to how they would like to see this move forward, seeing as we are the two, if you want to say, prime money sources for the cemetery board.
Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens.
So you just, if I may, through to Councillor Hughes, you just said that you're looking for direction from us, or is this going back to the staff to talk between the town and the township in that respect? Or are you looking for direction from this council then tonight?
Councillor Hughes.
Yeah, we'll be looking for direction from council on how they would like to see this proceed. Potentially have staff bring a report back to, bring a report back after discussions between the two municipalities.
Yeah, so a little further on that, yeah, it's just looking at giving permission for staff to have those discussions and then bring us back information so we can make a decision.
So no direction from us tonight.
Just that the staff can have those discussions and spend some time on it.
That's what I wanted.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we will now move on to AMO delegation, AMO attendance for Deputy Mayor Wilson. Any questions of that correspondence? Seeing none, I will ask for Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens has a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Deputy Mayor Wilson. I don't think that she should be moving it herself. Councillor Helleroux, would you second it? Yes. Perfect. So, seconded by Councillor Helleroux, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll approve the request from Deputy Mayor Lindsay Wilson to attend the AMO Association of Municipalities of Ontario Conference, August 20th to 23rd, 2023 in London, Ontario.
Any discussion on that? Councillor Helleroux?
I just want to say it's a nice move by the deputy mayor requesting, because seeing that we are only allowed to attend one conference a year, this being the second one in this year, it is definitely going to be a loss if we had no opportunity to have someone go bring back that valuable information. So thank you for requesting that, and we'd love to get all that feedback from you.
Excellent. Any further discussion? Deputy Mayor
I'll just
Wilson?
add, sorry, through you, the mayor's also going, and I may have forgotten to make this request if he hadn't made his last month, so there will be a couple of us attending.
Seeing none, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And I'm glad to be not going alone. Stepping into the minister's room with just yourself is, when they have a full slate of people on the other side, is a little bit intimidating, so I'm glad to have the company. And we will now move on to request primary care committee. And I believe there, Deputy Mayor Wilson, you have a resolution for that?
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Bowman, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll approve the request received from the Ingersoll Primary Care Recruitment and Retention Advisory Committee to donate $1,000 towards the 2023 Discovery Week Reunion Lunch event, and that the funds be sourced from the Ingersoll Primary Care Recruitment and Retention Advisory Committee budget allocation.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I'm going to skip the next two because I believe we are going to have representation from the Ingersoll Senior Center later this evening. So we'll do that at another time. But we will go down to number 6, which is Public Works Oxford County Backflow Prevention Bylaw Update. And Councillor Halleru, I believe you have.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor. So moved by myself, just give me a moment here. The backflow. So moved by myself, Councillor Halleru, seconded by Councillor Hudson, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive the correspondence from Oxford County regarding the backflow prevention program bylaw update as information.
Any discussion on it? All those in favor? Sorry, I didn't have my microphone on there, so any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And then we'll head down to the last of correspondence, which is Oxford County Resolution Code of Conduct, and that's Councillor Hudson, please.
Yeah.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Kooten-Bosson, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive the Code of Conduct resolution from Oxford County Council as information. And whereas all Ontarians deserve and expect a safe and respectful workplace, whereas municipal governments, as the democratic institutions most directly engage with Ontarians, need respectful discourse. Whereas several incidents in recent years of disrespectful behavior and workplace harassment have occurred amongst members of municipal councils, whereas these incidents seriously and negatively affect the people involved and lower public perceptions of local governments, whereas municipal codes of conduct are helpful tools to set expectations of council member behavior, whereas municipal governments do not have the necessary tools to adequately enforce compliance with municipal codes of conduct. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County of Oxford supports the call of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario for the Government of Ontario to introduce legislation to strengthen municipal codes of conduct and compliance with them in consultation with municipal governments.
Thank you, and this is brought...
Sorry,
no,
there's more. Also, it be resolved that the legislation encompass the Association of Municipalities of Ontario recommendations for updating municipal codes of conduct to account for workplace safety and harassment, creating a flexible administrative penalty regime adapted to the local economic and financial circumstances of municipalities across Ontario, increasing training of municipal integrity commissioners to enhance consistency of investigations and recommendations across the province, allowing municipalities to apply to a member of the judicacy to remove a sitting member if recommended through the report of the Municipal Integrity Commissioner, prohibit a member so removed from sitting for election in the term of removal and the subsequent term of office, And further, that this resolution be circulated to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honorable Steve Clark, Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Honorable Ernie Hardeman, Oxford MPP, Charmaine Williams, Associate Minister of Women's Social and Economic Opportunity, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and all Ontario municipalities.
Thank you very much. This was brought forward at county by Councillor Wheaton from Woodstock, and it comes in response to Bill 5 that failed in the legislature. And so we're 100% supportive of this. I do believe we should all have a workplace of free from harassment, and certainly we're supposed to be leaders in the community, so we should certainly be held up to the same standards as everybody else. So I'm full support of that. Is there any other discussion? Anyone? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Excellent. Okay. We'll just see how we're making progress here, and then we'll make a decision on where to go next.
So we're going to have to, we'll be able to show the feed on the live stream, but we won't be able to see it here on our screens. So each of you will have to follow along your presentation on your agenda from here, but the people in the public will be able to see it. So if we can have the O.P.P come back to do their presentation, we'll take over now, go through that process.
Absolutely. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, I'll give everyone a second just to get the presentation up on their screen, as long as, is everyone good to go, I guess? Okay, perfect. So we're on the first slide right now, just the intro slide. When we left off, I was gone on to the overview, which is slide 2. And just to talk about what we're going to talk about today, quickly, once again, just the O.P.P service delivery model, the billing model itself, understanding your billing statement here in Ingersoll, and then we're just going to open it up for questions. So we'll go to the next slide. This next slide's our vision, and this comes from our business plan, or our strategic plan that we call it. Like every business, the O.P.P, we also have a business plan. It's called our strategic plan, and it talks about our visions and our goals and our objectives of what we're going to do over the next few years. So this is right out of our strategic plan, and our vision statement simple. It says safe communities, a secure Ontario. And what that means is basically the O.P.P has a dual policing mandate, and it's something we have to achieve from our own organization, which is our provincial obligations and our municipal obligations. So when you see a police officer out and about in your community, they're doing two things. They're doing the provincial obligations, and they're also doing their municipal obligations. So I'll go to the next slide. And this is where the vision statement ties into our O.P.P service delivery. So when we talk about O.P.P service delivery, it's how do we do two things at once? How do we achieve our provincial mandate and our municipal mandate at the same time? Well, both of them complement one another. When we're doing provincial things, our provincial legislated things that we have to do, which we'll get into and explain, and also answering our calls for service and looking after the communities that we serve, we have to do that, and we have to do it in a way where we separate the billing from our provincial billing and our municipal billing. So if we're out doing a provincial activity that the government pays for in other avenues versus a municipal responsibility like a call for service, we track that. And so when we talk about understanding OP service delivery, how do we track that? We have a system called DAR, which we refer to internally, and it stands for Daily Activity Reporting. So a police officer on their day-to-day duties here in Ingersoll or across the province, as they do their calls for service, they are tracked. And we do that doing coding, and we also use GPS. Our dispatchers are involved. We have other levels of accountability and quality control where we actually monitor what a police officer does throughout their whole shift. So in that DAR system, if an officer went to a call in one municipality, they were working, say, in this municipality in Ingersoll, and they left here and they went to, say, an unincorporated territory or First Nations community, and they did a call for service there, this system would ensure that this municipality wasn't being billed for that. So it's a way to track what we do and how we bill. There's also lots of other benefits to having the O.P.P service delivery roll out this way, because it allows the O.P.P and municipalities to share the cost of infrastructure, share the cost of human resources and everything else we need to deliver, a superior product for the province of Ontario when it comes to community safety. I'm just going to go to the next slide. I'm going to let Janet talk for a minute here, and she's going to talk about our overall budget and those provincial and municipal responsibilities. Janet?
Thank you. Thank you. So does everyone have a slide with what looks like a wheel? Okay, lovely. So this is a visual depiction of how the O.P.P budget is broken down in a year. There's a budget of $1.2 billion. The majority of that, $778 million of that, goes towards provincial policing responsibilities. And then along the right-hand side of that slide, you might see what some of those are. Those provincial responsibilities include traffic safety, investigations, intelligence, auxiliary policing, community safety, and specialized response teams. So the special tactical teams that come in as required, those are provincial responsibilities for which municipalities do not pay. There is no cost recovered for those provincial services. They are provided as required to all municipalities that we police. On the left-hand side of the slide, we see the municipal policing side, and this is the slide where the O.P.P does recover costs and funds are returned to the Treasury Board. So things that municipalities are billed for include any detachment staff, so the supervision, the frontline staff, the calls completed by those staff, as well as any support positions at the detachment. Those support positions include prisoner guards, people like Rob and I who head out and municipal policing specialists who deliver information across the province, IT, vehicles, uniforms, those are costs that are recovered for on the municipal policing resources side. So the O.P.P must recover $412 million annually. And how do we do that? So we'll move on to the next slide. And we do that by using a key component of how we keep track of the municipal and the provincial obligations is the DAR system that Rob mentioned. That DAR system keeps track of officers, the types of calls they're responding to, and where they're responding to them. Then we have the municipal bills that recover those $412 million. Those bills are divided into three main components. One is base services, the next one is calls for service, and then the final category is additional other costs. So on the next slide, this is another visual depiction. So everyone sees a pyramid type slide. The largest category is the base services costs. Those costs are allocated equally to every household policed by the O.P.P in Ontario. So what that means is all of the administrative costs are pooled and then divided up equally per household that the O.P.P polices. That cost is multiplied by the number of households in a municipality using the MPAC data to determine the base services cost for a municipality. That, as I said, that is equal across the province. Every household is billed roughly $165.66 as a base cost. From there, we have calls for service. When someone picks up the phone and calls the police for an incident, there are certain types of calls that the municipalities are billed for and certain types that are not. The DAR system sorts through those, and the appropriate calls for service are billed to municipalities. Those calls include crime calls, provincial statutes, general calls for service, motor vehicle collisions. Those are calls for service. The police respond, and there is an incident created, and municipality is billed for that call for service. The third category of billing is called other costs, and that will include other costs that are incurred locally, things like overtime, court security, any accommodation, cleaning costs, that sort of thing. Any enhancements are on top of that. So those are the three main components of the bill. And Rob is going to talk about your bill in a moment, so I'm not going to get into your bill unless I tread into his lane. Before I hand it over to Rob, though, I will highlight the O.P.P billing model was introduced a number of years ago. Before it was introduced, there was a wide fluctuation in billing rates across the province. That had to be addressed to make things more fair, more transparent. The billing model was introduced, and it has achieved one of our main goals. If you see a slide that shows a number of vertical bars, is that the slide people are on? Thank you. This slide shows the blue bars have gradually increased, so the budget that the O.P.P must recover has been gradually increasing in the blue bars, but you'll see the red bars, the cost per household has remained relatively constant across the province for the last 10 years. That allows councils to plan and avoid spikes and dips and valleys in the bill. Based on the billing model, we've implemented a number of factors that use averages and that sort of thing to take those spikes and those valleys away. Moving on to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Rob, and he will talk about your bill.
Sure, thanks, Janet. Is everybody on the bill? Perfect. So Janet had a chance to just talk about our base service, calls for service, and other direct operating expenses, as you saw in that pyramid. What's really unique about that, our base services, it's all of our, I like to look at it as the base services being all the proactive stuff, our bricks and mortar, everything that we need to do our job. And then the calls for service being the reactive policing. So anything proactive is base service, anything reactive is calls for service, and then finally your other direct operating expenses. So we have the bill in front of us, and I've put boxes around each area. So if we look at the pyramid that we just saw earlier with base services on the earlier slide, and we look to this slide, you'll see base services outlined in orange. And you'll see it's very, very straightforward and simple. You'll see property counts, and property counts includes households and commercial and industrial properties. And in Ingersoll, as per MPAC data, right now you're showing as 5,678 properties as households. And then in addition, another 256 commercial or industrial properties. We get a lot of questions a lot of times about what's included in these properties. Like for example, something like a farm field wouldn't be included in this. It's not a property that would be included in this. And we have definitions on our website of what is included in these property counts and how they're calculated. But there are some properties that aren't included, and there are others that are. So sometimes we get the question, what about an apartment building? Well, it's each dwelling in the apartment building that's billed, not just the apartment building as itself. And the reason for that is because it's an individual family in there, and they're all paying individual taxes, and that's how we determine how we do that billing. So total properties, 5,934. And as Janet mentioned earlier, that shared base cost or the proactive stuff that is included, $165.66 per household. In Ingersoll, we have here the next calls for service, total for all municipalities. So because this is a provincial budget that we're dealing with, we take the overall budget and then we come up with a percentage of what Ingersoll's portion of calls for service were in the entire province. We'll go into a bit more detail on that in the coming slide. It'll give us a bit more of a breakdown, but last year on your bill from January 1st to December 31st, 2023, for our estimate, we have 0.8367% of that total budget would be Ingersoll's portion, which, when broke down per property, is $251.80. Additional costs, overtime and prisoner transportation. In relation to overtime, $11.90 per property, and for prisoner transportation, $1.17 per property, bringing a total per property for Ingersoll of $430.53. As you can see below, there is an adjustment down below, and it's in the $16,651. As you can see, our estimate was estimated at $2,554,754. What ended up happening was when they reconciled the bill, they realized that it was estimated higher, so they gave you an adjustment back to reduce that, or sorry, it's the other way around. They were too low and they went higher, so there was an additional $16,651 in adjustments as per the actual data. Next slide. We have here O.P.P policing cost trends. So this basically shows over the last 4 years your cost per property here in Ingersoll versus the O.P.P cost per property average. So if you can see, and Janet made this point earlier about the consistency and how balanced the per property cost is over a 4-year period. So 4 years ago it was $447, and today in 2023, $431. So you can see there isn't any high peaks or low valleys where you're having to adjust budgets last minute to accommodate a change in policing budget. So this is a very consistent way to look at policing. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this slide here, I like to call this my favorite slide. I always say this is my favorite slide because this is on page 5 of your billing statement. Before I go any further too, I'll let you know that everything that you see in this presentation, it's actually available on opp.ca. So everything in here is public and accessible via the internet on our opp.ca site, which I have on the last page. The billing breakdown that we have here in front of us, page 5 of your billing statement, is all the calls for service. So when we were talking about base services, calls for service, other direct operating expenses, when we talked about the calls for service, this is what we're talking about here. So these are the billable calls for service. So anytime a police officer is dispatched to a call, depending on what it is, it'll be put into one of these categories. We call them working groups. So there's 9 working groups in your billing statement. So if somebody went to a domestic disturbance call, we would consider that an operational call. So if you'll see the third line down, you'll see operational. So that is a call where there is no criminality. It's a pretty straightforward call where police go, they keep the peace, and they move on. So that is under operational. And you'll also notice under operational that that is your highest volume of calls. So you can see in 2018, you were at 1,863 calls. And then we have a 4-year average estimate of 1,764. So you can see a decrease there. And I'll go into that in a moment. But this is completely normal for every municipality. Operational is always across the province the highest because that is a category where police officers do their most work. It's the, keep the peace. It's the, small detail that you go and you spend less time on. And that is why these calls are looking at a higher volume. So each one of these working groups, what they do is they calculate, we have our finance people calculating an average time of what it takes an officer to complete one of these calls in these working groups. So if you look under 2023 average time standard for an operational call, they have 3.8 hours. So that being said, if a police officer goes to a domestic dispute call, we'll stay with that, and it takes them 7 hours to do that one call, it'll still be 3.8 on your bill because they're going for an average across the province of what it takes to complete that type of call. If it takes an hour, it's the same, it's 3.8. But overall, it's that average number that works out best. And again, this is another way to keep things at a consistent, instead of having highs and lows for your time standards. Another reason this is a great slide is a council or a police services board. It lets you know how the detachment's doing, what's going on in your community. You can look at these billing groups and you can see things like, I don't know, you can look at, we could say on operational where you have, 4 years ago you have 1,863 operational calls, and now you're down to an average of 1,764. But if you look at the reconciled number in 2021, you have 1,471. So that's almost 400 operational calls less than what you were doing before. So there's a few reasons for that. Probably a great inspector, maybe, if that could be one reason. Another reason could be we have a lot of efficiencies that we're working on at the O.P.P. So there's many things that we're doing to decrease calls, moving the costs from the municipalities to the provincial side. We're doing things like mental health outreach, where we're taking some of those calls, we're diverting them using partnerships in the community with mental health workers, where they're coming out on calls with us, getting ahead of calls so that we don't have to respond multiple times to these smaller calls. So you can really see the reflection on the things that are being done to help reduce things. So another efficiency, which is great, is 911 dropped calls. Years ago, when we got a 911 call, when I was a young officer, we'd have to attend every call. So if there was a 911 hang-up, you had to go, you had to stay on the call until you figured out what it was or what it wasn't. Even if you could prove it was like a static line through the phone company, you'd still kind of have to do a full investigation. Well, with technology and everything, we can now eliminate those calls at the beginning, and we don't have to respond to those. So a lot of these calls are coming off of the bill, so to say. And O.P.P, we're constantly reviewing these things. We have working groups in place that are, trying to keep efficiencies up and find new solutions to reduce calls. So I'll keep moving on. Cost by municipality. It's a little hard to see. It's small here on the screen, but another thing that's available for you on opp.ca. A lot of times we get the question, well, how do we compare to our neighbors next door or across the province at a town or a city that's similar size to ours? Well, if you go on to this tool on opp.ca, you can actually put in your municipality, other municipalities, and it'll give you the populations, it'll give you the costs per property, and you can play around with that number just to see where you fall as far as crime statistics and whatnot. So very, very helpful tool. That's on there. I'm going to keep going. I know that we had a bit of a delay, so I don't want to hold everyone up. And this is actually my last slide, the most important slide. It's the question slide, but it has our contact info on it. I really wanted to kind of get through this quickly because you have this presentation in your possession and you can thumb through it on your own time. But really important, if there's any questions while we're here today that anyone would like to ask or us to clarify about the billing statement or the billing model in general, I'd be happy to take those questions, and so would Janet now.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from council? Councilor Van Koetenbos.
Sorry, I was just quickly looking through that very last slide. I didn't look at that ahead of time. I apologize for that. But my question would be, I notice on the the calls for service billing summary, so it's based on a 4-year average in that respect. So, I mean, our numbers have continually gone down, which I attribute to the police officers, to the inspector that we have at the top, but obviously the police officers that we have in the town as well. But we're still paying way more. We're going off an average that's not reflecting that our numbers are coming down. So I guess we have to have 4 years prior to really see a drop then in our billing in that respect, because really our billing is based off of 3 really high years, and then we've been consistently coming down. So we're still paying way more than possibly we're using then.
It's a great question, and you're right. It does take that 4-year average to balance out, and there's benefits to both, instant rebate or long-term. And when Janet was speaking earlier, she spoke of, that consistency and not having the ups and downs. So say 1 year something tragic happens in the community, where it requires tons of resources. I could just use an extreme example, like a homicide, where it requires multiple officers coming in, investigative teams, lots of hands-on, overtime, all these things. That's not going to affect your bill this year. It's a long term. It keeps that consistent balance going. So you're right. It is that 4-year average where you will start to see that reduction. Hope that answers your question.
On a follow-up, just on what you've just said, but doesn't that become a provincial if we were to have a homicide happen within our community? When I'm looking at provincial and specialized responsibilities, doesn't that fall to the province to pay, not necessarily the municipality?
That's correct. You have got that right.
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I'm just saying, like, I've been a part of the council that was here when it was highs and lows. But at the same time, I mean, if we're looking at provincial responsibility versus municipal responsibility, then I think that needs to be taken into account as well.
Yeah, correct. So the initial call itself, the initial call out for the call, that is a billable call for service. Okay, but once the frontline investigation is completed, it's turned over provincial responsibility where they have investigative teams. So I don't know if you saw recently on the news, some of these investigations take years. There was just an old homicide cold case that was, how many years was that? 48? A long time. So they investigate these for years, and the municipalities aren't responsible for that time that those investigators stay on these calls. It's the initial call for service. So it would be under the violent criminal code section, where you would have your initial call for service that could take, a day, but it couldn't take a lot of officers to respond. It couldn't take a lot of crime scene work. It could take all these things, but you're right, then it's turned over and it becomes a provincial responsibility. So once that initial front line is done is when it turns over. Yeah, Janet was going to add something as well.
Another example might be if you had a major event like a flash mob or a major concert or a bunch of people come into your community unannounced, and it's an event that results in a lot of calls for service. So all of those calls for service would be billable calls for service. But because they're averaged out over the 4-year period, it eliminates the spike you might have seen in your bill previously. Does that help clarify? Thank you.
No worries, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I just want to thank you very much for making the trip down and providing some clarity, and hopefully we'll have some more questions for you another time.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone once again for having us as well, and by all means, you have our contact information if there's any further questions. Please also visit opp.ca, municipal policing in the search category. We have all of our information there. We have presentations there. We have webinars there that we do. We also have a lot of tools to work the bill and see how things fall if things change. So I encourage you to go there, and thank you again, and have a great rest of your night. Thanks.
Yeah, I think we'll just go back up to, we had a little bit of a technical difficulty, so we bounced around a bit. So we'll go back up and we'll just continue down the agenda now. And we'll go down to special staff reports, and communication strategies report is the first one. And I'll turn that over to Mr. Graves. Oh, yes, we can do a delegation for the resolution, for the, and who is that under?
That's myself.
Councillor Hallerow, please.
Thank you, through Mayor. Moved by myself, Councillor Hallerow, seconded by Councillor Hudson, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive the presentation by Sergeant Robert Griffin, Janet Feaver, and Detachment Commander Anthony Hymers regarding the O.P.P billing model as information.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And now I will turn over to our CEO, Mr. Graves, for the communication strategy report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We Council will recall this report was here at your last council meeting, and this is really a level of service discussion. So the clerk has done a very good job putting this report together to look at the different options for communications. But we're really here to hear from council what kind of level of service they would like to look at and get some feedback on that so that we may proceed.
I believe Deputy Mayor Wilson has a resolution. Is there any questions before questions of the report? I know we had it last month, so you just had time to look over it. Seeing none, I will ask Deputy Mayor Wilson to read the resolution, please.
That the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive staff report C-018-23 as information, and that Council provide the following direction to staff: to hire a communications employee for a 2-year contract position, and that Council approve $35,000 for one-time expenses for office equipment, office space, technology, marketing, etc. Furthermore, an estimated annual salary and benefits totaling $74,500, prorated for the year 2023, will be funded from the 2022 operating surplus, and that this employee be tasked with a SWOT analysis identifying the most appropriate tools and communication methods to implement Council's engagement goals, and that this employee bring forward a report to outline the goals of the communication and engagement for the first 6 months for Council's consideration.
Thank you. And as the mover, would you like to speak to that?
I mean, through you to staff, this was a really well-done report, and it obviously took a lot of time to help council understand what the levels of service could look like. So I'm really appreciative of helping us frame that information, and with all the effort that went into it and the feedback we've heard from residents about the need for communication, I think, in my opinion, the only way to accomplish that is to really dedicate a staff person to accomplishing those things. So I'm obviously supportive of the motion I've put forward, and hoping we can get this person to work.
Councillor Bowman is the seconder. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Deputy Mayor. It is something we've needed for a long time. I think we've moved in the right direction during this term of council, and I think we're continuing to move in that right direction. And I'm like the idea that we're encompassing not only the younger generation, but the older generation as well, because we've got a very diverse age range within our town, and I'm glad to see that we're covering all the bases, or at least trying to cover all the bases.
Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens, please.
I'm very much in support of this. I think that it's our job to not just say, okay, we want this to be done, but we want to hire that person, and for them to come back and say, this is what needs to be done. We've gone out, we've done a SWOT analysis, and now we're bringing it back to council and saying, this is what we've heard from the people. This communication is all about what we're hearing from residents. So I think going in the direction of hiring somebody, not for us to sit and discuss, okay, do we go paper, do we do this, do we do that? It needs to be that staff person to come back to us and say, this is what I think would be in the best interest, this is what I'm hearing from the community, and then we can move forward from there. It might take a little bit longer, but I think it is the right direction to go, and then we get exactly what the community is looking for, and hopefully we've engaged them so that they feel like they are being heard. So that's my 2 cents to add. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Hallerow.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Definitely excited to see that we finally made a commitment to get someone on this site. Just referring to the initial request from some of my early emotions and my naivety earlier, it was definitely looking for something that would have someone focus 100% on this. As a member of the newcomer committee and newcomers to Ingersoll, most people definitely need a way to engage with the community, to learn what's happening. And I think since this is up for a true request from us to see how we would like to move forward, I think a real direct publication is something that should be paramount. As much as there's going to be a SWOT analysis, I think that is paramount to any communication. People want to know what's going on, what do we have, who's doing what, and through that, every department can have this central person. So I'm really excited to see that one person will sit on this and make this come true for us.
Yeah, I think this is, we have a level of service issue here where we want to say, where do we want to go with this? And I think this is an absolute base right here, is to have a person dedicated to it. Staff have told us that they need the resource to be able to provide that level that we want. There's lots of options out there. Of course, having that person who has a background in this and be trained will go a long way to be able to provide things that work and are effective in our community and be cost effective as well, and make sure the message we all want out there is out there and people can communicate. It's a hard task, but this is a good first step towards it, and we'll see where it goes. So I am fully supportive of it. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. I do want to say that is another, it's certainly not finished, but it's definitely another strategic plan item that's been acted upon by council and staff. So thank you very much for that. And then, as time goes on, we'll see how that evolves. So that's exciting things when those happen. We'll now move on to number 2, updated and new user fees. I'll hand that over to Mr. Graves as well.
I'll immediately turn it over to the clerk who's put this together. There's a variety of fees that are in here from a bunch of different departments, so we may have to hear from some other departments if questions arise.
I really don't have too much to add to that. Just the report reviews a number of proposed amendments to the 2023 fees and charges bylaw, which is bylaw 23-5244. As noted in the report, since the fees and charges bylaw was adopted, staff have received a number of requests from various departments to update or add fees to the approved schedule. So I put it out there to all the departments to say, let's just put it in one report, one request. So that's why there are quite a few within this report. The report outlines by department each fee to be adopted or amended, as well as the rationale for the request as provided by the department head. Those fees that are approved by council will be brought forward at the August meeting via bylaw to formally amend the fees and charges bylaw. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the report? Oh, certainly, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one question, Danielle, on under the parks tree replacement fee. We've got a proposed fee for the buyout in lieu of $250 per tree. Can you tell me what type of a tree that would buy for $250?
I could speak to that one.
Respond to that.
If I could, through you, Your Worship. We base this fee based on what we purchase our trees for our planting that we do throughout our community and through our roads department. So it was an average of what the trees are for those. It's a fairly decent sized tree, depending on the type, can be like 6 foot to 10 foot. But we wanted to get a fee structure in place. Council will recall the more trees report that we wrote and the policy that we created that created a requirement for when a developer cuts down trees, they have to replace 3 to 1 trees. So in that process, we have to come up with a fee that they need to pay should they not be able to provide 3 trees on the site when they cut them down. This fee meets that criteria, but with all things in planning, we have to make them defendable. So normally we need to do a study that says, here's the types of trees that we can defend and the wages that would cover that. We have not yet done the study. So we've come up with a set amount that we think is easily defendable as a place marker right now, as we're getting some developers that are requesting how much would we pay. So I will remind council that if a developer cut down a tree, they would have to pay for 3 trees at $250. And that would be $750. And we may, through our tree policy, as we're developing how many trees we plant, we may choose to plant a larger tree for that, but it could get us what our normal trees are that we give out, and we also plant through our roads and our works department. And I also want to remind council that when a developer cuts down a tree, it's not expected that they would replace exactly the same size tree. That's why we have a requirement of a 3 to 1 tree. So that's how we came up with that figure from the brain of your CAO, so feel free to.
Down,
That's correct.
Any further questions? Deputy Mayor Wilson.
Through you, I'm in agreement with Councillor Bowman that the 250 seemed really low to me personally. It's difficult to find comparables. I tried, but Woodstock they're $1,350. Their cash in lieu tree replacement fee. Markham was $460 to $600 depending on the size of the tree that's being removed. Toronto $583, Peterborough $550. So I understand these municipalities aren't necessarily comparable in size, so it's not a perfect comparison, but $250 is less than half of all of those. So I understand we're trying to just get this moving, but I think, in my opinion, $250 is too low. So I would like to see that.
So what I would commit to is in the 2024 budget, putting in some money to do a study to back up our fees so that we could be defendable on what that fee is, and we could come up with an amount and say this is what it should be, so that we can't be challenged by the developers on how we came up with that fee rather than just the brain of the CAO.
Councillor Van Koosen Boston's and then Councillor Hughes, please.
So off of that, then my question would be, our tree policy, is it close to coming back to us? And at that point, we would be able to come back and redo this if we felt that the tree policy wasn't enough in that respect? Or should we be taking this portion out? I mean, we've got developers who are looking right now. We have a very sizable property that has a lot of trees and a lot of mature trees. So as I've been hearing from residents on this one as well, there has been talk of, do we charge more if it's a bigger tree, so a longer tree that has been there, a 100-year tree, versus a 5-year tree? Or is this just a blanket amount? And I said, well, from what I'm reading within the report, it's a blanket amount, but we do have a tree policy that's supposed to be coming forward as well. And I'm not sure where that's at. So could that be a part of our policy as well? And then coming back to this and revising this one as well? Sorry, long.
If I could, Your Worship, through you. The tree policy really is about how many trees we're going to plant and our goals for that. It will be annually reevaluated, so that will handle this. But to do our tree pricing report, we need a more comprehensive report that would actually look at and compare if it's this size tree and how we would market to determine what the cost would be and if there's scalable ones. So we would need a more comprehensive report on that, and we didn't want to wait for that comprehensive report, and we don't really have budget for it at this point. So we will budget for that next year. That component will come in 2024. In the meantime, this is a place marker that gives us some value out of any trees that are removed. Wherever possible, we'll be encouraging developers to plant their own trees or not cut down their own trees. When you're getting to even the cost of $750 per every tree you cut down, there's a fairly good incentive to keep that tree. So we're hopeful that that will encourage them to keep that tree. But a more comprehensive report does need to be done. We just wanted to get this in front of council so that we have some fee and we're collecting something rather than nothing.
Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Halleru, please.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So the CAO just answered the one question about the 250 to 750, so they're paying for those 3 trees. Point of clarification from you, Deputy Mayor, when you quoted those prices, was that per tree? And is there that same scenario where we're calling 3 to 1? So is it $500 or $600 times 3, or what is their ratio for replanting?
Through the mayor. I don't have a comprehensive report. That was just what I could find in terms of cash in lieu. I didn't compare the tree replacement. And those were mostly through private tree bylaws, so it's also not the same as a tree policy, so it is not apples to apples. And it's not a perfect comparison.
So arguably, we could be in the same ballpark as what other municipalities are charging then, correct? You could say, without all the information to be able to say yes or no.
Councillor Halleru, please.
Yeah, so I have a question. So is this fee structure only for when developers need to cut down trees, or does it also apply to residents who, say, for example, want to cut down a couple trees?
If I could, it's through any planning type process, like a site plan, severance, or a subdivision, or any of those types of developments would trigger that they're required to pay that fee.
So to add to that, I believe it's, so if you have a tree in your backyard and you cut it down, you're not required to pay the fee. It's more if you're causing, if there's trees there now and you want to change what's there, then it would be.
Okay, so follow-up to that would be when we're looking at our tree planting policy, that we consider what it would actually cost for a resident to want to take down a tree, because that's one of the things that I know most municipalities actually refer to when they talk about fees for cutting down trees. So you can, but there's a consultation with the city, and then there's a cost if it has to come down, or a replenishment of that tree somewhere else. So I think, again, thinking of our tree policy, we might need to incorporate all of that.
Yeah, Mr. Reyes?
That could be a component of that report that comes forward on analyzing the fees, is that you could look at what that would mean for individual properties as well, which would require an upgrade to the tree policy, but it is something that council could at least get the numbers to the background to, and then decide if that's a direction they'd like to go in the policy.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I will ask for Councillor Hudson, please. You have a resolution.
Thank you, Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive staff report C-022-23 as information, and that Council approve the adoption of and amendment to the fees and charges as identified in report C-022-23, and further that Council approve the formal adoption of said fees and charges via bylaw at the next regular meeting of Council.
Discussion. I just want to say I always appreciate, there's a lot of work that obviously goes into tracking everything and making sure there's a lot of some that were brought for clarity. Obviously the pavilion, you have different pavilion rates, so that's good. I do like the sponsored skate one. That'll probably be well used by people and provide some clarity there if they want to do some good in the community. So I'm sure if anybody is wondering, you can now sponsor a skate for $160. So let's make sure that happens and give everybody opportunity. And so, yeah, there's lots of good things that happen. I will say that the marriage fee license, our staff have been great in taking part in a pilot project for online, which has increased the workload, of course. Again, this is just another example of, this is a provincial responsibility that municipalities perform. And so hopefully, appreciate it's something we have to do, but again, it is a provincial responsibility, and so it should be charged adequately to cover those fees and costs for that, so appreciate that one. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And down to athletic excellent grant requests. I'll turn that over to you, Mr. Grace.
I'm going to turn it immediately over to the clerk to handle that one. Thank you.
Thank you. This report considers athletic excellent grant requests under the town's community development grant program for 4 athletes who have qualified to compete in the Karate Canada Nationals. The program allots $250 per athlete for participation in a national championship, contingent on the athlete providing a post-event report and any related receipts. All 4 athletes meet the program's eligibility criteria, and the staff are recommending that they be approved. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the report? Seeing none, I believe we have a resolution from Councillor Van Kooten-Bosens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Deputy Mayor Wilson, that the Council of the Corporation of Town of Ingersoll receive staff report C-023-23 as information, and that Council conditionally approve the athletic excellence grant requests of the following athletes to support their participation at Karate Canada Nationals: Zaid Al-Dadak, Yasser Al-Dakak, Matthew Degula, and for Olivia Maltby. And further, that each applicant be issued a $250 grant in accordance with Section 5 of the Town of Ingersoll's Community Development Grant Program upon submission of the required post-event report and event-related receipts for a total of $1,000 to be funded from the Grants to Volunteer Organizations account.
Discussion. Councillor Van Koot-Bosens and Councillor Halliday, please.
I think this is great. I know all four of these young people. I don't know if I butchered their names, and I'll apologize now if I did. But I do know that they're away right now, and they've started competition as of today. So I'm wishing them all the best of luck. I hope that their coach, Victoria, is watching online at least and can see what we're doing. But I wish them all the best. And I haven't gotten any texts, so I don't know how they're doing, but hopefully it goes well, and I hope that council will help me in supporting this. So thank you.
Councillor Halliday.
Thank you. I have a question. Is there a grant that is open for like anyone to apply where we don't have to actually have a sitting of council to approve something like this? Like a blanket grant that anyone in the community through sports could actually apply for and get without our input?
Through the mayor to you, Councillor Hallerow, there isn't. So under the program, it's considered, the application would come to myself and the treasurer for review. Once we review it for eligibility, we then draft a quick report and bring it forward to council for their approval. That's just the process that's been adopted for the Community Development Grant Program. But if it's council's direction, we can look at updating the delegation bylaw.
Yeah, because I'd like to propose a motion that says we have a community grant allowing anyone in the community to, to apply to this and not have to wait for council to for example, to approve something when it might even be time sensitive. Sometimes I just feel like some of the bureaucracy and some of these things are not necessarily allowing for, motivation or competition. If there's something that kids have to aspire to earn and they qualify, I think there is a way we could go about it without it actually coming to council. I think this is very small for us to have to spend time on. That's just my opinion.
Just for clarification, are you moving the motion? Okay. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Just to be clear, I'm just,
Wait, we just have to,
yeah.
is there a I'm not seeing a seconder at this time.
Well, I don't want it to clarify the motion.
Okay, yep, clear.
I want us to consider a motion that allows us to have, like, there's a monetary figure, $250 per applicant, if they qualify for certain criteria, to actually be granted this without it coming for approval. Like, if we have a set amount established for this for different sports or clubs, I imagine it's something staff could be directed to look into.
It certainly could if it's council's prerogative. So is there a seconder for the motion? There's not. I'll speak to that. Is that I think it's important that we do have these come forward at council. They can't collect the grant until they've completed the event anyway, but I think it's important that we recognize our athletes at a council meeting and give them recognition. I certainly want to see them come forward after and come to a council meeting, and so we can honor them that way as well. But I think that's half the fun is having it at a council meeting, getting their names out there and having the community recognized when people are traveling outside the community to be able to be recognized. And I know during COVID, we used to have quite a few athletes and people come in for plaques and stuff like that. So it'd be nice to have that happen again. That kind of put a damper on everything, especially with athletics traveling. So it's nice to see that they can, and certainly wish them all the best. And it's probably a blast they're having, just the opportunity to be able to travel and compete. So, yeah. Any further comments? Discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We will now go down to number 4, which is the 2023 budget variance report, please.
Thank you. We're delighted to have our treasurer back with us, especially when there's times like these for these reports. So
Thank you, but it's not my report. And it sounds like my report, but I can't take credit for that, so thanks.
I liked how you tried that, Tommy. Good evening, members of council. So it's my understanding that each year a budget variance report is brought to council with respect to facility and parks items. It does a couple of things. It provides council with an opportunity to know what projects have come in over budget, but more importantly, what's come in under budget. And with the report, you can see that we do have a surplus in terms of those projects that have been already tendered and already processed in terms of that work being done. So with that surplus, we're asking council consideration to approve 3 additional projects with the budget surplus, namely the museum washroom roof, the memorial washroom demolition, and the arena camera system. It being noted that even with those additional 3 projects, the budget would still be in a surplus position. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the report? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Through you. Just looking at the Fusion building automation system, I know we did try to receive some funding for that through another, I guess, I'm going to say an independent funding source. Have we tried to achieve any other funding through any other organizations in order to get that funding?
I believe that was through the grant match funding program for Fusion. Unfortunately, we were not successful in getting funding monies for that. We have not taken a look at any other funding opportunities. This was our opportunity, I guess, to take a look at the surplus monies that have already been budgeted to see if we can use that money to add those 3 additional projects.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call upon Deputy Mayor Wilson, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Bowman, that the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive staff report CS-012-23 as information, and that Council approve the following additional projects for a total amount of $31,720.63, with their funding to be sourced from the savings generated by the under-budgeted capital projects as detailed in the report. The museum washroom roof at $10,800, the memorial washroom demolition at $12,530.63, and the arena camera system at $8,390.
Discussion? Councillor Hallerow.
I just want to say thank you for at least identifying those projects. Is there because I'm a member of the Accessibility Committee, and currently what we're discussing is the town has to have some form of inclusive accessibility rule for every project that we're doing. So I just wanted to mention that becomes part of any new renovation or updates or anything. And I'm not sure how that happens, but because we're talking about it and we're still yet to bring a recommendation to council, I just wanted to mention that because it's already approved and identified.
Yes, thank you. We are aware that any new building should be reviewed by the Accessibility Committee, absolutely. Thank you.
Excellent. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And we will move on to Parks Building Assessments, please.
We'd like to remind council that when we did our asset management presentation, we saw that number of our facilities were underfunded for asset management. And what we're seeing in this report and what we've seen in this department for the last few years has been that we've been trying to bring these facilities up to a standard. That's the gap that we're missing. We've done a very good job in our asset management for a number of our hard infrastructure that's in the ground, but it's these facilities that we've been getting to. This report is really here to document what remains to be done on some of these facilities in some of our parks. And although it's a long list, we're not saying that everything's going to be done right this minute, but we are trying to identify when we get to the point that a number of these facilities are upgraded, then it'll be our job going forward to continue to plan for those items and put money away for the future to create a true asset management for these facilities. Unfortunately, that wasn't done in the past, so that leaves Michelle to advise you of where we stand with some of these facilities.
I'm not sure if I have much more to add in that Michael, the CEO, is right in terms of this information is going to help us with our business planning for 2024 budget and beyond. It's obviously better to be proactive than it is to be reactive, right? And especially when these public buildings, the public depends upon them, they want to be able to use them, and we want to make sure that they get used as well. So it's for information, but I did want to highlight a recommendation in there that I'd like council direction on, and that is the Centennial Park Bridge. The consultant has noted that there are deficiencies with respect to the bridge, so we need to bring that to council's attention. Obviously, we want to make sure that our park amenities are safe for the community to use, and so the recommendation is to remove the bridge. However, we're looking for a council consideration with respect to that item.
Questions of the report? Councillor Halleru.
How much will it cost to remove the bridge rather than to fix it?
I'm not sure that I have the answer to that, to be honest. And that's something, if that's a council direction, we can certainly obtain costs to do that and bring that back to council. But that's something that I wouldn't have right now.
I can just add to that, knowing that the bridge is not, it's very easy to remove. It's actually designed to be removed in flood situations, so it's not pinned down, so it will move. It has moved in flood situations. It's had to be retrieved, but that's by design. So removing it is not a big cost. It's replacing that would be a larger cost. Further questions? Is staff looking at implementing a larger maintenance program? By looking at the pictures, these buildings have gone downhill over time, and that's always a concern of upkeep versus getting to the point where something has to be demolished. Our town has a bad history of that, so it's something that certainly I think council would like to avoid in the future with asset management.
Absolutely, that's the proactive approach that the department would like to take. I think that we need to take that rather than being proactive. So when taking a look at what we need monies for in the 2024 budget, we're going to be taking a look at what kind of maintenance program should we have for buildings so that we're not running into these situations where it's almost like an emergency repair, or we need to taper off the area so that the public can't use it. So absolutely, we're looking more at proactively kind of taking a look at these buildings and the condition of it, so that we don't run into these situations.
Another question I have is, a lot of these are near baseball diamonds, and so looking at those structures, some of those are getting tired as well. Will staff be looking at a larger field of view to say, I guess as a sports joke, sports pun, to be able to say, look at the equipment all around there for upgrades as a whole, or just particularly the buildings on the property?
We think it's important to take a holistic review and a view of all of the equipment and the buildings. So that'll take some time. Certainly, these assessment reports will help us with respect to the buildings, but we'll be doing like playground inspections and other inspections of the areas to know what it is that we need to bring forward in future and upcoming budgets. But definitely, we want to make sure that, again, we're being proactive rather than reactive, and it's important that we understand what work that needs to be done today so that we can maintain those features in the future.
Councillor Van Koot-Bosens.
I'm just wondering, we still have approximately 30, I'm doing quick math, but 30,000, 34,000 left over from the surplus, because we've just approved the 31,000. I'm wondering about us replacing that bridge. I don't know if it would cost more than 30,000. I have no idea, but I'm putting it out there because I know that that pedestrian bridge is used a lot by the people walking down in the park. The day that I was down there with my family, there was a ton of people that were walking their dogs, walking with their families, and they used the pedestrian bridge every single time. So I would really, I understand that we need to make it safe, and I'm all for making it safe, but I would prefer that we try to replace it. And I don't know if we, can ask that of staff to come back with a report or say that we have this much money, can we do it, kind of thing. And I don't know if the mover has anything in that respect, but it's just something that I was thinking about as we're sitting here. So I will leave that with the mover's thoughts.
Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, just, my recommendation would be to, the council ask staff to bring forward a report specifically on the bridge and what the cost would be to replace it and the timelines and so on. And so that's what I would request, because I don't know the numbers off the top of my head either.
We can certainly have the motion put on the floor. I know Councillor Bowman does have a motion ready, and then we can always amend that and debate that motion. So, is there any further questions of the report? Seeing none, I'll call on Councillor Bowman then, please.
Mr. Mayor, I guess the first question I'd have is, we're still talking about what the washrooms were into the assessment. The Cook House in Memorial Park, Michelle, when you say you're going to tear it down and rebuild it, what are you going to put in its place? Like, is it just going to be an ordinary square block building? Or what are you considering when you say that it should be demolished and replaced with a new one in its?
So we're talking about the cookhouse,
House, yes.
right, which is identified in the assessment report?
Yes.
So again, that's, we're taking that under, like advisement, we're going to be taking a look at that to determine what the next steps are in terms of what we're looking for as part of the 2024 budget. So that one may not be a demolition. Certainly, we have some commentary from the consultants in terms of what is needed. So we're going to take that information to inform our department in terms of what we need to bring back to council in terms of any upgrades or what we can do to that building.
Okay, thank you. The reason I ask is as you know, I'm very much history inclined, and that building was built at the same time that our band shell was built. And it does, in my mind, have historical significance because they were built by the same builder. So I'd hate to see it taken down. Once it's gone, we've lost it. And it's already been pointed out, we've had too many buildings in our town disappear. And once they're gone, we never get them back. So I would really like to see something done with that building to try and preserve it somehow. And I think it's in my motion as to what direction I'd like to go. Is he ready for the motion?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, Councillor Bowman, and seconded by Councillor Hughes. That the Council for the Corporation of the Town of Ingersoll receive report CS-013-23 as information, and that the bridge in Centennial Park only be removed if absolutely necessary, and that staff be directed to investigate options of replacement costs and the possible cost sharing with UTRCA for the replacement of the bridge. And further, that staff bring back a report to compare the cost of repairing the Memorial Cookhouse in Memorial Park versus replacing or repairing the cookhouse in Memorial Park versus replacing the same with an exact replica of the existing building. And that the information on the cookhouse also be forwarded to the Heritage Committee for as information.
Discussion. Councillor Bowman, as the mover, would you like to speak to that?
I think my concerns about the bridge have already been brought forward by Councillor Van Kooten-Bossens. It is a bridge that's used very much by the public, and I'm just a little concerned that if we remove it, they're going to try crossing the creek without a bridge, and I don't know which one would be worse. I know the bridge is in need of repair, but I think we have to keep a safe alternative there, as safe as possible. And the cookhouse, again, I would hate to see it taken down and either not replaced or taken down and have a cinder block building put up when it doesn't really suit the band shell, when the two are sort of, I guess you might call them bookends in that part.
Councillor Halleran?
Through you, Mayor, I just want to say I totally support the motion by Mike, because I live in the neighborhood across, and that's the only bridge that we have access to use to get to the park. So I would rather see something kind of replace it rather than completely take it out. And as his motion mentioned, there's something to do with the Heritage Committee, maybe also being a part of helping to see how we could maybe restore things rather than just take things off. So yeah, fully support that motion.
Councillor Van Kootenbos is by a second, and then Councillor Hughes.
Okay, so I didn't hear in the motion that it was to be done right away in regards to the bridge, or did I miss that? I'm just wondering what you're, because I know you don't want to have it taken down, and I hear that, but I just want to make sure that it's being brought back hopefully by next month, because we're in the heat of summer, and I want everyone to be safe in our community. But you're right, I don't want people crossing the stream either. So I'm just wondering, I mean, maybe as soon as we can get pricing, even if we have a special committee meeting, like a special council meeting, to make that determination of going forward or what we're doing. I'm just wondering if we can give staff direction or whether it needs to be a part of the motion.
Mr. Graves?
I don't think we need a special council meeting. It'd be our intention to bring back a report at the next council meeting for you to look at to what the options are for the bridge. So that's what we would do.
Councillor Bowman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you and through you to Councillor Van Kootenbos. So I didn't put as soon as possible in there. I didn't want to put a timeline in there when I'm asking for the cost sharing as well, because I don't know how long that would take. I would just like to think that staff would do it sooner than later. And as soon as you're able to come up with costing and sharing of costs, that they would be bringing it back to us.
Councillor Hughes?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I do have a couple of questions. First is with the bridge. Will the bridge be blocked off for no access until we make a decision, until we get all the information?
That's a good question. I was just having a preliminary conversation with the new engineer, and we'll either do some type of signage or something to indicate that's possibly a hazard. So we'll have those discussions. We'll take a look to see what we can do. We might even reach out to our insurance company to see what suggestions they might have. So we're going to take a look and explore different options. But at the same point, we'll certainly let council know.
Perfect. And the second part of that question is to do with the Heritage Committee. I fell asleep at the switch when we were talking about the band shell, but now, with the condition of the cookhouse, it's definitely one of the reasons why we formed a Heritage Committee here in Ingersoll, is to have that access, to have that information. So I think this cookhouse as well as the band shell is two good opportunities to utilize the Heritage Committee and get their input through to give a full evaluation, and then at the same time move forward with looking at doing heritage designations for those property, or for those pieces of property that are a town asset as well.
Further discussion? Yeah, I'm supportive of the motion. I think that I know we have an assessment, and if at all be the end of the day the decision that has to be made to remove the bridge to keep it safe, then I can understand that. But if there's any other option in the meantime until we get a bridge in there, yes, is it increased risk? Yes, but at the same time, that bridge has been definitely, the railings have been that height for 20 years. And the condition of the bridge has been about the same for the last 10 years. So I agree it needs to be replaced and it needs to be done. I am seriously, if you take something out, there is almost a crossing there. You have a pathway leading up to it, kids getting in the creek or whatever like that. I don't know if that's a safer option than a bridge that may be possibly not as up to code as it could be. Although it might have been up to code when it was built because it was so long ago. But I'll leave that to the experts to come back and see what we can do in the meantime. I'm supportive of the rest as well. I agree with Councillor Bowman. I don't want to see that cookhouse destroyed. I think it does, even does have historical value. from a holistic point, from the whole park, it has historical value as a part of Memorial Park with the architecture in it as well, with the roof lines and everything. So I think it has been a debate for a long time about what to do with that. I think we find a use for it that's useful, whether it is, I don't know, put that out to the community as well. If you have any ideas, send them in. But I think it's worth saving. It's a type of development that was common at one point in that park. So it's worth saving, in my opinion, so I support that. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And we'll now go down to operating budget variance report. Mr. Reeves?
This is the report I was thinking, thank God, my treasurer.
Okay, thank you. So the purpose of this report is to present council with a financial overview of town's operations for the 6-month period ending June 30th. So the report indicates a net surplus of $788,000. We identified notable variances in both revenues and expenses. So in terms of revenues, the total revenues for the 6-month period are exceeding the budget by $316,000, indicating a positive trend. As indicated in the report, some of the contributors would be the building department that saw an additional revenue of $184,000 due to the issuance of 2 building permits for the 2 industrial facilities. Also, the community services exceeded projections with significant growth in membership and program revenues that were supported by increased fees and also notable recovery from the pandemic. So we've seen the revenues have significantly increased in comparison to last year. And we also received 2 generous donations, one from the Rotary Club and Kiwanis Club. So the donations totaled $28,000 that contributed into these positive numbers. So regarding expenses, there was a significant total favorable variance of $787,000. So specifically, the favorable variance of $370,000 was reported in salaries, wages, and benefits. So that's the total variance across various departments. So this variance reflects the seasonal nature of some of our part-time positions in departments like Parks and Recreation, Community Services, and also includes an impacts of vacancies across also various departments, specifically Fusion Center, Victoria Park Community Center, and I know that, for example, engineering service had some vacancies that have been filled since, but that's just to give an example. So another variance to note was an unfavorable variance of $176,000 reported by the Economic Development Department in professional fees. This was due to the carry forward of the secondary plan update. So that project was budgeted in 2022 and the funds were allocated in 2022. The funds were not utilized and they have been reserved and will be transferred once the project is completed. So overall, the financial performance for the reporting period has been positive, with notable revenue growth and favorable expense variances. And the report also provides some comprehensive breakdown for each department for council and public to review. So, and I will be more than happy to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Deputy Mayor, please.
Through you, Mayor, to staff, not so much a question, but a comment on the community services membership revenue getting back to pre-pandemic levels. That is really impressive. A lot of even for-profit fitness facilities have struggled to get to that, so how that's come back.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I'll ask for a resolution from Councilor Hughes then.
Thank you. Yes, definitely great work, staff. This is a great reflection of our continued dedication to Ingersoll and our continued growth in Ingersoll with the surpluses of the building department in regards to building permits to the new industrial products that are buildings that are going up. Moved by myself,